Okay, ready to go, Councillor Blake.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's Executive Board meeting. Can we get proceedings underway and go through the formal parts of the agenda, please? Item 1.
Thank you, Chair. Item 1, to confirm there's been no appeals received for today's meeting.
Item 2.
Thanks, Chair. Exempt information. To confirm, Chair, there is no information on the agenda which is designated as being either exempt from publication or confidential.
Item 3.
Late items. Yes, Chair, with your agreement, a report entitled Update on the COVID-19 Pandemic Response and Recovery Plan has been circulated to board members as a late item of business for consideration at agenda item 17.
Item 4. Does anybody have any declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests? No, take silence as a no, thank you. Item 5, can we confirm the minutes in the pack as a correct record of the previous meeting? Okay. Can I welcome Councillor Lamb, who is here in place of Councillor Carter, and move on to the items on the agenda, starting with item 6, children and families. Could I hand over to Councillor Venner, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The report that I'm presenting today is the fostering report for 2019 to 20. It's a national minimum standard requirement that this report's presented to this meeting. So because it's a report of 1920, most of it's pre-COVID, but it would have been a very strange report to not include a reference to COVID. So it does include some paragraphs, including that we've had fantastic placement stability for children and young people in fostering during the pandemic. And also there's a reference to the fact that we've had a huge increase in the number of people coming forward expressing an interest in fostering, as I've mentioned at other meetings. There's an explicit recommendation in this report that we increase the number of children and young people that are within foster families in Leeds, and that we decrease the use of external residential placements and also children and young people being placed in independent fostering agencies. We benchmark very well in terms of the West of West Yorkshire with regard to our use of IFAs and external residential, but it is a really strong recommendation in the report and aspiration of the service that we will have more children in foster families in Leeds, and we're in a good place to achieve that because we've had such a huge increase, an unprecedented increase in people registering an interest in becoming foster carers. We're also reopening or opening 2 children's homes, Cromner Bank reopening next week, and then Acorn 2 is in progression, which will bring children back into Leeds who are not currently in Leeds. That will be a home like Acorn Lodge, where it will support children with profound disabilities who are currently outside Leeds in specialist placements. The report refers to a specific piece of work around improving the offer for families who take out special guardianship orders. There's some regional work around this, and there's also a piece of work happening in Leeds. One of the reasons that the figures around the children that are looked after have gone up is it's not children coming into care, it's children not leaving care. And one of the reasons is that there has been disparity between the support and financial support you receive as an SGO carer compared to if you're a foster carer. So there's been regional and local work to improve the offer for families to take out special guardianship orders, which provides permanence for children and their families. There's a reference to Leeds becoming a foster-friendly employer with regard to our own employees, and once we have that status, we can promote that externally, including with our child-friendly Leeds ambassadors. And there's a reference to increasing the number of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, which I've talked about in a number of places. I'm very proud that Leeds has stepped forward to be one of the authorities that's helping Kent with the humanitarian crisis around unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. That will increase the number of our looked after children, but of course we will be able to disaggregate which are unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. Finally, Chair, I'd like to refer to the very positive all-party parliamentary group report on kinship care, which was launched a few weeks ago. So this was a cross-party report looking at kinship care, and the report references Leeds very positively and extensively. The main recommendation of the report is that local authorities should consider kinship care before they consider other foster care arrangements. And the average in the country for kinship placements is 20%, but in Leeds, 34% of our foster families are kinship foster families. The report also recommends authorities putting in place interventions that Leeds has had for many years, like family group conferencing and Mockingbird hubs. So Leeds really is highlighted in the report as an exemplar of good practice in kinship fostering. So the fostering service is in a very robust, very positive place. We've had great placement stability, as I've mentioned, during the pandemic, and our foster carers have been incredibly positive about the support they've received from the authority during this time of crisis. So I'm very happy to recommend this paper to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments? Councillor Lamb, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. No, it's a good report, positive news, and I'm happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Well, it's saying all the right things, Councillor Venner, but it's very uncertain in terms of what its targets hope to be. So, for instance, in that aspiration for the council to have more in-house placements for our foster carers, the target seems to be that you end up being a net positive in terms of the number of foster carers within the in-house service, which doesn't sound like particularly great ambition, given that year on year on year, Leeds Children's Services have underestimated the needs of the children that come across its books and have overestimated the capacity for its in-house carers to look after them, with the consequence that we are over-reliant on external providers. And in terms of the cost of those providers, they are nearly 100% more expensive than being able to deliver care within Leeds. So I would have liked to have seen an ambition which actually targeted at least a 20% increase in the number of internal foster care placements. It really feels that that aspiration is very underdeveloped, and it would be nice to see some more certain progression in that. And then secondly, on the residential footing, you mentioned homes which were going to come on stream. The majority of those were homes that we already had and had been taken out of service. And our in-house residential offer is significantly smaller than it was a decade ago, for instance. And I think it would be really useful for the council to be more explicit in its ambition there as well, in terms of making investments in bricks and mortar to ensure that our children can be looked after within Leeds. Because even though they're in our care, sometimes those children still do need to have access to family. And the further they are away from the communities that they're in, they're put at a disadvantage. And so some more certainty about actual actions in terms of just ambitions would be really helpful.
Councillor Venner, should I ask Sal to come in and comment on?
I'm happy for Sal to comment, and then I'll come back as well, Chair, if that's okay. Thank you.
Sal, would you like to?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Blake. I mean, I think what we're looking at when we're trying to manage the number of children that we've got in the care system is a complex picture, and it's not just easily straightforward, because children's needs over time and on a daily basis change, and we have to adapt in terms of meeting those needs. both in terms of the types of placements that they're in and the kinds of services that they require. And trying to get the balance right, we have an approach that aims to increase the number of in-house foster carers that we've got, to reduce the number of independent fostering placements that we use, and we have reduced that by over 100. So that a number of years ago we were over 300 children in independent fostering association placements. We had 110 children in external residential, and that figure's now down to 64, with an ambition to bring that further down below 60. So I think that we are making strong efforts and are ambitious about changing those numbers. Our overall numbers of foster carers have also gone up in the last 5 years from around 680 to 820 at present, and we have seen year-on-year net gains, including a net gain of 8 fostering households this year. And if you think about 8 doesn't sound a lot, but actually in terms of if you make sibling placements, for example, you can soon see what kind of impact that can have. The fostering market is a very competitive one, and we fare really well against independent fostering agencies compared to lots of other authorities. We haven't lost any foster carers to the independent fostering market over the last year. And over the last few years, we've seen quite a significant number of those foster carers who previously worked for independent agencies coming across to Leeds because of the varied and supportive approach that we take to supporting our foster carers. I mean, the other parts, I think Councillor Benn mentioned the issue around special guardianship orders. So we have improved the offer there so that we can continue to provide permanence and reduce the number of children that are in the care system. We are continuing to reduce the number of children that are coming into care, particularly in our most deprived neighbourhoods where there is the highest pressure, and to continue to rehabilitate children within their families. We also have a lower percentage of our looked after children in residential care, 6% here compared to 11% nationally. And all of the actions that we've taken over the last 10 years have seen us reduce our number of children in care significantly compared to significant increases elsewhere in the country. Recently, we've had an independent ex-director of children's services come in and have a look at our looked after children's services, and he was surprised by how well we are doing in terms of continuing to increase in-house foster placements as and continue to reduce our reliance on the independent sector.
Thank you. Councillor Venner, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to add to say, Sal referred to a net gain of 8 foster carers for the period of this report. That's because we registered 40 new foster carers and deregistered 32, very often because they've become SGO carers or they're involved in staying put arrangements. If after the period of this report, we had a net gain of 8 new foster carers in a 2-month period, which is why we're very confident that we will increase significantly the number of foster carers this year. With regard to the residential estate, I think I was really clear that Cramner Bank is reopening. It's not a new home. Acorn 2 would be a new home. But I wanted to be really explicit with Councillor Galton that it isn't our ambition to increase the number of children's homes we have in Leeds. It is our aspiration that children are supported in family settings. And we do look for that to be kinship care first. We want to increase the number of children that have the permanence of special guardianship orders, and we want children to be in foster families where neither of those options are possible. So we're not planning to further increase the number of children's homes. That's not our aspiration for our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Venner. I do find it really difficult when Councillor Galton just keeps coming back with the same arguments. However many times we've gone out of our way to explain to him the direction of travel, the work that we've been doing with foster carers, the you know, the incredible investment in terms of giving our foster carers support over the years has absolutely transformed the relationship from where it was when we inherited the situation. I'd also like to highlight our philosophy as a council in terms of supporting early intervention, and I think it's in this area where we've seen so much benefit from investing early in the life cycle of a problem, working with partners, with families, and as Councillor Venner said, really pleased to see that the work, particularly around kinship care, being recognised and really supporting the progress in terms of achieving better outcomes for young people, and that's surely what we are here to do. But with that, I think Councillor Venner, you've answered his comments very succinctly. So can we agree the recommendations of your report and move on to the next portfolio? Councillor Charlwood to take us through the health and wellbeing papers, starting with agenda item 7.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Executive Board. So I've got 3 papers in my portfolio today. The first brings forward the recommissioning of the learning disability and autism care and support services. So historically, the council spun out our in-house learning disability support provision in 2015 to commission an organisation called Aspire through a block contract, and that means that we pay for services then delivered without personalising that commissioning to individuals. So they want to deliver all the services for people with learning disabilities that were previously delivered in-house, but it doesn't cover all of the learning disability work that we fund by any means. Many people get services elsewhere, but the main purpose of this report is to seek approval to consult on the recommissioning of this service. The financial value remains around the same, but we have done a huge amount of work looking at it, about options, whether it's the right thing to do, could we bring it back in-house? We couldn't find the financial arguments at the moment to do that. So the contract value remains around the same, a few thousand extra. But the main difference is that we're looking to personalise the commissioning through individual budgets for services delivered to people rather than a block contract, as the report details. But it is a large contract, over £20 million, I believe. So I would put that to Exec Board for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lamb, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The one thing I'd just like to explore and get an understanding of, I've done quite a bit of work with Aspire and been impressed with the services they provide and the way that they work. What I'm keen to know about those, when they were set up, one of the expectations was that they would look to build their base outside of the City Council, and from what I can see, that simply hasn't happened. And I don't know what we're doing as a council to support and work with them on that, and if you can tell us anything about what their plans are, their business plan to grow beyond the council. I'm just concerned all their eggs are in one, well, our basket, and that's a little concerning.
Could I bring in Kath or Caroline?
You're right, the bulk of their business is with the local authority, and they have extended that by helping us develop very bespoke services for people from the Transforming Care cohort. My understanding is they're now looking to expand their business to our nearest neighbours. So we will have Leeds residents who are on the border of Wakefield or on the border of Bradford. And my understanding is they're looking to market their services to those neighbours.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton.
I support the paper. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. With that, can we agree the recommendations in the paper and move on to your second paper, Councillor Charwood, item 8?
Thank you, Leader, and thank you for the approval on that paper. So item 8 is living with dementia and Leeds, and this is our dementia strategy for the city, 2020 to 2025. So this strategy has gone through the Health and Wellbeing Board, has had significant consultation and involvement, and is an integrated strategy between health and care system in the city. It describes 13 building blocks and 6 commissioning priorities that together make Leeds hopefully the best city to live in with dementia. And we are committed to be the best city to grow old in, and to be age friendly, despite our continued difficulties potentially financially as we go through the years. We are still committed very much to helping people age well and to be dementia friendly. So over the last 7 years, the report highlights some of the key achievements. We've had over 130 Leeds residents become dementia friend champions, and they've run almost 2,000 awareness sessions, enabling over 30,000 people to be dementia friends. Elsewhere, training has been provided across the NHS and in hospices. We have high rates of diagnosis, so people can get the support they need. We have a Leeds memory service who sees more than 90% of people within 8 weeks of referral, and they are really well regarded. More than 65% of people have a diagnosis within 12 weeks of referral. We identify health inequalities as we always want to improve the health of the poorest, the fastest. People are often not seen as quickly if they have inequalities. So inequalities can be linked to heart disease and type 2 diabetes being risk factors for developing dementia. Memory support workers are established as part of Leeds neighbourhood teams, older people's mental health teams, and are linked to GP practices. So there's lots of really good work going on. The report also highlights some of the distress that recent issues with coronavirus restrictions have caused and been, awfully experienced by many people suffering from dementia and their families when they've been prevented from seeing one another. And this has taken a huge amount of our time and energy in trying to right what is a very, very challenging and very distressing situation. I wrote to the Department of Health and Social Care asking them to consider testing for family members to allow them to be key workers for visits or considered as key workers. So a huge campaign, I think, nationally has happened as well, and a lot of people believe in this, and I'm sure government wanted to do it what they could here as well. So Alzheimer's Society and Dementia UK have also been involved in that, and thankfully they've agreed to a pilot project where relatives of care home residents in England are to be designated as key workers. But that's a pilot, and we really, really want to get that implemented as soon as possible, given that it's winter. So I'll just leave it there for now, but I'm happy to take any questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to support the recommendations on this one.
Councillor Galton.
No comments, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for your comments, Councillor Charwood, and for all of the work that you're doing in the areas that you outlined. Very important work, and I'm very pleased to hear that that it is getting through and that actions are being taken. We need to make sure we're vigilant and we keep the pressure on to keep that going. But thank you, everyone. And can we agree the recommendations on that report and move to your final item, please?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Leader. So the next paper that I have, again, a very important group of people in the city who we really want to support and help. And this is the Leeds Carers Partnership Strategy. So carers being unpaid carers, people who care for people who they love and who are not employed to do so. So we try to do as much as possible as a health and care system to support carers. It's a very challenging agenda because people don't necessarily self-identify as carers, don't necessarily seek support where they perhaps could or should. and we have to do more to identify carers proactively as a health and care system to make sure that people get the support they need, especially at the moment as things people are are under a lot of strain. Again, this strategy has gone through the Health and Wellbeing Board and had significant consultation with the relevant groups. So highlighted in the report, we estimate carers provide staggering 1.5 million hours of unpaid care across Leeds every week, and the financial contribution of carers in Leeds to be around £1.4 billion per year. The strategy aims to drive a strong system-wide approach to ensure that we recognise and value the role of the carers and promote their health and well-being as well, and that we reduce health and financial inequalities that they've experienced due to their caring role. So the council, alongside the CCG, we already invest in our carers through things such as commissioning information, advice and guidance services through Carers Leeds and Leeds Young Carers Support Service delivered by Family Action, and support the provision of short breaks for both carers and disabled children for respite purposes. And we really are committed to supporting people in this way as far as we possibly can. So going forward, we want to improve the identification of carers, support carers to care, improving the offer to young carers, increase carer voice and involvement, establishing a Leeds Carers Forum that's run by carers and for carers to provide a voice for them, and make better use of technology to support those in caring roles, increasing the educational and training opportunities for them so that they can understand their rights and also care safely and effectively, things like moving and handling their loved one without damaging their back or whatever it is, or even their mental health as well, how we can keep well while we're doing the things we want to do for our loved ones. So we also want to provide and intend to provide support for organisations and businesses to develop more carer-aware workplaces in Leeds. I think it's fair to say there is a huge amount of work that goes on and very passionate staff and teams that champion this approach in Leeds, and I'm really proud of that. So this is the strategies to be put to Executive Board for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. Again, happy to accept the recommendations.
Councillor Galton.
Also happy to support, Chair.
Councillor Chalford, I was just wondering if we could build in a further report back to Executive Board as to progress on this. I don't know if you have any plans to keep us updated.
Yep, absolutely. We do bring carers issues and reports quite regularly to Executive Board and to the Health and Wellbeing Board. So I would have thought we would continue to do that, and I'm sure within the year we'll bring another report back.
Okay, thank you. So it just strikes me an current
a progress update.
Oh, sorry, your sound quality just disappeared slightly there. I'm sorry for jumping in. I was just thinking, in the current climate in particular, it would be really helpful for us to keep a close eye on how people are progressing in very challenging circumstances. So thank you very much for the report and for all the work that's gone on and to enable it to come forward to Executive Board. Can we agree the recommendations of item 9, please, and then move on to item 10, which moves us on to Councillor Rafiq's portfolio.
Myself, thank you, Chair. This is the report about the merger of Groundwork. Groundwork have been a valuable partner and an influential third sector organisation in Leeds for over 30 years. During that period, they have supported the delivery of a number of environmental projects that led to improvements in our communities and tackled the climate emergency. They also recently established a community hub during the pandemic that supported the coordination of community volunteers and storing food parcels. Since 2015, Groundwork Leeds, Wakefield and North Yorkshire have been working in a more holistic manner, and this has allowed the organisations to make significant savings and share skills, knowledge and expertise. This support seeks to formalise that process and merge Groundwork Leeds with its neighbouring Groundwork charities to establish Groundwork Yorkshire and continue these savings and improvements. Leeds City Council would become a member of this organisation and would continue to make an active contribution to groundworks activity across the region. Setting up a local Leeds-based partnership alongside the merger will ensure that the members continue to have a direct role and can influence how the City Council's financial support of groundwork is directed and used by the organisation in Leeds. Supporting the merger will improve the resilience and sustainability of the groundwork and will hopefully lead to the residents of Leeds Chair benefiting from the expertise and contribution of groundwork in Leeds for many decades to come. I'll stop there, and obviously, if members got any comments or questions, then we'll be happy to answer that.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. There's just one issue I've been asked to raise on this one, and it's about the Morley property that sits with groundwork, and it's just to see if groundwork have now or would have in the future the ability to leverage income by borrowing against that property.
Okay, James, are you able to pick that up?
Yes, I am, Chair. Because the asset effectively is within the charity, then I suppose it applies now to Groundwork Leeds as it would do to Groundwork Yorkshire in the future. Yes, they would be able to leverage borrowing against that asset if needs be. But we've, in transferring that asset, we've always been very clear that any use of that asset must be to support the objectives of the company that it's supporting. So it would be in furtherance of the objectives that we're part of the company for, if that makes sense. But it is their asset effectively because it's been asset transferred to them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's on that issue where my group is very concerned with this paper. It feels like the justification which is included in the paper which is presented to us at Leeds Executive Board is significantly different to the real catalyst behind this proposal. We were a little puzzled why these groups were proposed to come together when the paper didn't really specify any great benefit to the outputs from those three organisations when lumped together. And it was only after looking at the Wakefield Cabinet papers for their meeting on the 31st of October where it became apparent that we had been somewhat underinformed on this issue. And it feels like this entire merger is to protect the risk to Wakefield Council for £600,000 worth of debt which is owed to them by the Wakefield Groundwork Company. And in the Wakefield paper, it specifically refers to Leeds groundwork assets being available to raise money from. And I think that is something which is highly questionable. And therefore my group is reserving its position on this one until further detail can come out.
Okay, thank you. James, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, no, I can do by all means, because this is the very reason why this development has taken some time to bring forward to members of the Executive Board, because the issues that Councillor Galton refers to are the very issues that the members of Groundwork Leeds Board were concerned about when the merger was originally proposed. So we've actually spent the last, and I think it's the best part of 3 years, doing the due diligence work that's needed to support a decision by ourselves in terms of supporting the merger and dealing with that issue specifically in terms of the debt to Wakefield Council that Councillor Galton refers to and the assets. So the paper that Councillor Galton refers to is one that is quite dated now. And what we've where Groundwork have effectively got to now is there is a specific legal agreement in place which is for the repayment of that loan back to Wakefield Council. and the sole security for that debt is an asset in Wakefield, and the Leeds asset is not affected in any way with that. And that was the key issue that we were seeking to resolve in the time that we've been looking at this issue. So from a Leeds perspective, that is no longer any concern.
Thank you, James. Perhaps you would like to do a note for Councillor Colton and his group to update them on the background to the situation.
No problem at all.
Thank you. In the absence of further comments, can I put to the meeting to agree the recommendations, and can we, of course, note Councillor Galton's comments? Thank you. Could we move on now to Councillor Cooper's papers, please? Communities. So item 11, please.
Thank you, Leader. The first of my papers today is the annual update to Executive Board on migration in Leeds. As we know, an awful lot's happened in this last year, and our work in partnership on the Strategic Migration Board with others across the city has been really relevant given the turbulent times that we've been through, I've got to say. But it shows yet again how our model of partnership working together really does stand out above the others, I've got to say. So the annual report gives some interesting statistics and figures and positions. So the diversity in the city, we now have 169 different nationalities in the city, and 104 different languages being spoken. And the increase overall has been 4,300 people who are new to Leeds since 2017. So they're the outlying figures that the report goes into. There's a lot of detail actually on many of the projects that have been happening with the partnership in the city, and not least of which is the projects that our award-winning migrant access project have been fulfilling, and they've been really busy, as you would imagine, during COVID times as well. I think that we're expecting a new future skills-based immigration system to be implemented in 2021. And this will be applicable to both EU nationals and non-EU nationals, and will need certain criteria to be fulfilled. But the detail is all in the report set out for Executive Board. So we're just laying that before Executive Board today, Chair.
Thank you very much for the update. So, Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. No, happy to support this paper.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton.
Likewise, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cooper, and of course pass our thanks back to everybody involved. Can we agree the recommendations of that report and move on to item 12?
Okay, thank you, Chair. The next item under my portfolio is item 12, which is the independent review into street-based life in Leeds that the Leeds Adult Safeguarding Board commissioned. I did invite the chair to the board, but unfortunately had a clash of meetings and couldn't actually attend. So we do have Paul Money here with us today, who has been an integral part of the understanding and the progress of that independent report throughout. But before I pass over to Paul to go through the independent review in some detail with the board, I just wanted to say that we know that we had a number of deaths in the city going back to 2017 now. And we knew that we had to take action and do something about it. So we set up the new street support, launched the new street support scheme. And again, it's an excellent partnership approach, a multi-agency approach to dealing with individuals on a person-centred basis, that we've been able to really make the step change in how we work with those people who are living a street-based life in the city. The report sets out a number of recommendations, but I will ask Paul to speak to the detail of the report first, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, can I welcome Paul to the meeting? Really pleased that you're able to come and give us an update today. Would you like to do that now?
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, okay, so just building on Councillor Cooper's introduction there, I think the first thing to say is this wasn't a mandatory review. This was actually about us seeking to kind of learn and develop our ongoing citywide approach, and as part of that, we chose to work with our colleagues in Adult Safeguarding Board and using their powers within the Care Act to commission this review as part of that general approach. I suppose in summary, the review helps us in two significant ways. Firstly, by helping to ensure that the practitioners working at the front line, so to speak, on this agenda get the support that they need to help people who may not want to be engaged and probably do not recognise the harm they are experiencing themselves. It will, of course, as well, it'll also help us in terms of strategically thinking about how services can continue to work together effectively and remain as responsive as we need them to in this set of circumstances. As Councillor Cooper has said, we've not been standing still in Leeds, and it's a point that the reviewers acknowledge in the review of the report that's in the pack. Lots of work has been done at different levels to increase partnership working around what has been a growing need, certainly in recent years. So, for instance, if you look at 2019, over 446 people seen rough sleeping on our city's streets at least once in that particular year, but actually a quarter of that group being considered to be perhaps frequent rough sleepers. And similarly, somewhere in the region of about 540 individuals seen begging at least once on our streets, but over a third of them could be considered to be doing that frequently. So at the vanguard of our approach really is this concept of street support, the initiative that was set up after the September 2018 exec board, which suggested we needed to undertake a step change, as Councillor Cooper has said. Having done that, we are working to a strategy that's, put simply, looks to focus on three pillars of activity: prevention being one, on-street intervention being another, and recovery being the third. And through that approach, we've built up better relationships with partners. We've also built up better relationships with the individuals in the cohort of people who we're looking to support, and we've had the opportunity to listen to their views on what works for them. And as a consequence, we are definitely delivering more effective services now than we were. So, for example, in the last couple of years, the improvements with the work that we've done with Bevan Healthcare, drug and alcohol services, the concept of navigators supporting people in accommodation, a more varied and accessible accommodation offer, and lots more. But as the report says, in terms of the recommendations detailed, most notably in section 7 of the report, there is more work to do. I suppose to kind of conclude, the review will help guide our progression in the city, and it will help us. Our ambition ultimately has to be about prevention and using the collective insight that we've got and the partnership working and the intelligence that we have at our disposal. We must do as much as we can do to reduce the likelihood of people returning to living street-based lifestyles, and that's where the three-pillared approach comes in. Our experiences do tell us that people's lives are complex, and it's often this complexity that leads to people living street-based lives. Lots of them have been touched by tragedy, by loss, by adversity, and essentially becoming disconnected with normality as we would understand it. The work that we are undertaking needs to be significantly linked to the health and wellbeing agenda in the city, and we are moving very much in that direction with an integrated approach to how services are being commissioned and how we're actually working. In some respects, I would say that this isn't actually a community safety issue. This is fundamentally about health and well-being of our citizens. But obviously, those are citizens who do have the right to be safe and to feel safe. So there's significant work in partnership on that agenda. As I said at the start, the report details the recommendations in section 7. The learning points are there for us. Helpful in some respects, detailed under the 3 pillars: prevention, intervention and recovery. And we would propose, subject to views of this exec board, to take forward those recommendations through the governance arrangements that we've already set up associated with our street support arrangements. I'll pause there, Leader, in case there's any questions or queries.
Okay, thank you, Paul, and thank you very much for that update. And could I just ask you to pass our sincere thanks back to all of the partners who've been involved in pulling all of this together. It's incredible work that has gone on into making the report as rich as it is. Thank you. Councillor Lamb, do you have any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just referring to the 3 pillars, if we take each one in turn, around prevention, there is clearly good work going on in the city. One area I think that we do need to look at, and I wonder if Paul might like to comment, is actually what we can do with the criminal justice system. Because one of the issues is people being released from prison in an unplanned and unmanaged way on a Friday afternoon with nowhere to go. And that really is one of the big contributing factors to this issue. Where I would say the system is working well is on the intervention part. And I think the things that are in place are really showing good results. And I think you should be applauded and congratulated for that. The bit where I think we have to reflect that it's not going as well as it should be is the recovery phase. And I have to say that a large part of that is in the council's gift to try and resolve. And a big part of the issue is around the housing approach. And being flexible and realistic in the housing offers that are made and reletting properties quickly enough, and just simple things like where there are rules that people can't take a dog with them if they have one, and when they've got chaotic, disorganized lives, sometimes the dog can be the thing, and that will be what stops them taking a housing offer. So I think on the whole, this is a good and positive report, and good progress is being made, but I think we have to keep pushing. And I think there's more to do on the prevention side, particularly working with the criminal justice system, and much more to do on the recovery side. So there would be my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Paul, do you want to respond to those?
Yeah, I will do. Thank you. I think it's a good point in terms of the criminal justice system and some of the issues Councillor Lamb's just detailed there, particularly the release and reintegration of individuals back into our society. But to kind of reassure Councillor Lamb, as part of the street support work and as part of broader activity that we're doing around reducing reoffending within the Safer Leeds arrangements, we are very much focused on that issue. To some degree, we are talking about a national challenge here in terms of capacity within establishments and various other things, but be more than happy to provide Councillor Lamb with some further detail around the complexity of all of that, but certainly not something that's lost on us. And again, in terms of the point about recovery and in particular accommodation, I think one of the things I would say is our experiences in recent years tells us that this isn't simply about a roof over someone's head. particularly for the individuals that we're talking about here with the complex needs. It's as much about the package and suite of support that needs to be absolutely bolted in on a bespoke basis to individuals to ensure that that accommodation offer, which is, by the way, much more varied and much more flexible now in this city, actually works. And that's where that navigator role comes in that I detailed as I went through the initial introduction. So again, it's a key point, but progress is being made.
Councillor Cooper, did I see that you wanted to come back in? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Just to give Councillor Lamb some reassurance and thank him for his positive comments around the work that's being done in the city as well. But around the work around prison releases, that I know that we've conducted an awful lot of work with the prison authorities, with the governor of the prison, the West Yorkshire governor, over all the prisoners as well. And we're working in a different way now than we were a year or 2 years ago, a very different way. So I'm more than happy to ensure that you get a full and proper briefing on all the changes that have taken place and who we're working with and how that has improved the situation. So as in terms of the Friday release of prisoners and us then having an issue with it, and many of those issues have now been resolved and are working much better in the system, Councillor Lamb. So I'm really happy to make sure that you get that briefing around all of that work, and very much likewise, the work we've done around recovery as well has changed dramatically over the last 2 years, and in particular around people who have got a street-based lifestyle. As Paul said, it's not just about putting a roof over somebody's head. If the answer were as simple as accommodation, then we'd have it resolved in no time at all, I've got to say. But we've done an awful lot of work about people who have got complex needs, including their needs for animals as well. In that time, so we can offer accommodation now to people who have got pets who need to be off the streets. We can offer that, and indeed offer some help around supporting them to look after those pets in the right way, as well as themselves as well. So again, there's an awful lot of work that's not necessarily detailed in this report that actually I'm more than willing to share with you, Councillor Lamb, and ensure that you get all that full detail that you're quite clearly interested in. So more than happy to ensure that happens.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Galton.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The story of Leeds and our policy with the homeless is one which has been consistently positive for a number of years now, and I note what is mentioned in 4.2 about how the partnership approach has achieved significant outcomes in the city, and that should be recognised, which is one of the reasons why I was quite frustrated by this paper, because I was wanting to know why it was here. I mean, if it's just an annual review to say, look how we're doing, here's the outcomes, great. But it also referred to an independent review, which was obviously to see how we can do things better. And as I was reading the conclusions of that and the recommendations that came out from it, I felt they were very general, unfocused, and not recommending specific interventions or changes. And I just wondered if there is other detail behind the headlines where there are more specific challenges that have been set to the partnership to overcome some difficult obstacles, because the value of bringing in an independent consultant like Neil Reevely is that they're meant to offer a dispassionate appraisal, and the recommendations feel very, overwhelmingly positive and not giving any great urgency. So I'm just wondering if I've lost something in translation there.
Could I bring James Rogers in to respond, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in terms of the purpose of the report, I think it's important to stress that what we were keen to do is to report to members the actual independent review as we've received it. What the report actually seeks to do, because this isn't a sort of a review that we've waited for and not taken any action and waited for this, and then now we're going to consider what we need to do. So what we tried to do within the paper is outline the work that's been ongoing in outline terms the last 2 years, report to members and put into the public domain the outcome of the independent review. I do in some sense see what Councillor Galton is referencing in terms of the nature of the independent review paper, but I think it's a very different review because it's very much a learning review rather than a sort of inspection type report. So in one sense, it probably was always going to be a little bit different. I think there is a lot of detail behind this, which we will continue to bring to Executive Board looking forward. And one of the things that we're on with at the minute is quite a significant discussion with government around sort of further activity that we need to take forward on this agenda and potentially further funding that we're looking for on that. And I think when we get some positive outcomes on that for the medium to longer term, I think if we can bring back a fuller report to Executive Board which details in more fulsome terms all the work that we're doing on this, and at the same time respond to where we've got to and responding to this independent paper, I think that will be helpful for members and would deal with some of the issues that Councillor Galton just referred to.
Councillor Cooper, do you want to come back in?
Yes, yeah, if I can do, and just to really reiterate what this independent review was about for Councillor Galton, really. As I said at the outset of this item, this was about a review into the sad deaths of people on the streets. So the review was undertaken to have some understanding of that lifestyle that people were living and died in those circumstances, so we could learn lessons so that maybe in future that we won't have so many people dying in those circumstances. So that's the purpose of the independent review, and it was done in an independent way, as has been stated by Paul and by James, and we are now listening to the outcome of that review. The work that we have started back in 2018 and are continuing to do and improve all the time, means that we've come a long way already along the road of what that independent review would have expected of us. But we weren't about to sit still and wait until the outcome of that review before we did anything about it, because that's not in our nature. That's not how this administration works. And one death on our streets is one too many. So I'm more than happy to take the learning from any independent review that's been undertaken on our behalf.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those comments. Can I again thank Paul for joining us on the call today, and could you also, I'm sure, pass on our thanks to Richard, and sorry he wasn't able to join us on the call today, but do appreciate the work that he's put into that as well. So thank you, everyone. Can we agree the recommendations of the report, please? And move on to item 13, an update on the locality working. Thank you.
Okay, my next paper is on a report on locality working and tackling poverty and inequality in COVID-19. We were due to take this report earlier in the year, Leader, but unfortunately due to the pandemic and Executive Board business changing during that time, we've only been able to bring it today to Executive Board to show all the varied work. So some of it is pre-COVID, obviously, in the work that was being undertaken, and some of it is since the COVID-19 situation and lockdown, and the various needs of our communities in Leeds and how we've responded to those needs as well. I have to say that this piece of work around how we work in a more integrated way in our localities has been done really in partnership with the Scrutiny Board and Councillor Barry Anderson, who's been really involved in this work, to the point that he sits on the Strategic Neighbourhood Improvement Board and gives us the scrutiny, vision and opinion and views of his members on that board as well. And they've taken this paper as well before scrutiny and endorsed this paper and all the work, and thanked all the teams, and indeed influenced a cross-scrutiny board piece of work to ensure that other scrutiny boards are aware of the work that's been undertaken on this agenda of local working. So it goes into, the report goes into lots of detail about the 6 priority neighbourhoods that we are working intensely in. It goes into detail about the 12 targeted wards. It goes into detail also about work that's happening citywide. And I really am proud of this report because of all the various examples it shows that's been happening in the city. You know, so it's not just for me a black and white report that says this is what we're doing and this is how it's working well. Actually, it's showing some fantastic examples of how these things are working in practice in the city. So I'm really pleased to recommend this to scrutiny, to executive board today. You can see I'm working well with scrutiny, Chair.
Joined at the hip. Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. I'm probably as concerned as you are that Councillor Cooper and Anderson seem to be working a little too well together almost. But that's no bad thing. The comments I would make on this, first of all, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank and congratulate our neighbourhood networks for across the city for the work they've done. If I can be parochial for a minute and plug Wetherby in support of the elderly, Wise in my ward, that cover all of outer North East, and they've been absolutely fantastic. The other thing I think that's highlighted from this report is the importance of locality working and the value in it when we see local members working with local organisations and council officers. It is an incredibly powerful tool. I think we saw that across the city through the COVID response. Again, we probably shouldn't single somebody out, but I'd particularly like to take the opportunity to recognise Andy Birkbeck, who worked in our patch through COVID and across other areas as well. And he was someone, as many people did, that went way above and beyond what you could possibly expect during the crisis. And it's good to have an opportunity to recognise those individuals. And that the final point I'd make is it just shows, again, the value of community committees, locality working. And what I'd urge the administration is to think very carefully when you're looking at budget proposals that actually you can get a lot of value by devolving more to localities than taking away from them. And I think that would be a sensible approach to take moving forward. So that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Do you want to come back?
I think just thank you for your positive comments, Councillor Lamb, and your support for the work that we're undertaking.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Well, this is a paper that is emphasising what can be achieved when real focus is delivered within communities. And one of the lessons that came out of our COVID experience was that those communities that had enjoyed anchor institutions that had received consistent support from the council in terms of commissioning for services and making sure that they had the funds that they needed to deliver for their communities, was something that put us in a really good position in some of our more deprived neighbourhoods. But because that same enablement work hadn't been done to the same degree in some of our more outlying communities, the need for more anchor institutions like those that have become more embedded in our deprived areas has become apparent, so that we can have agency and empowerment across the city which will enable the council to deliver a universality of response. And I look forward to that strand being developed over the next year or two, because I think this is one area where communities could really come into their own if they take a lead on that kind of community capacity building.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back, Councillor Cooper?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And just to give Councillor Galton some reassurance around that work is already starting. Indeed, it started during COVID-19, as Councillor Lamb quite rightly pointed out. You know, we had volunteer hubs in every ward in the city. You know, being able to help those who were, you know, stuck inside with no assistance at all, by giving food parcels, by telephoning them, speaking to them, helping and assisting and supporting as and where we could. We had over 8,000 volunteers in the city stand up and reach out. That was across the city. That wasn't just in our priority neighbourhoods. It was in every ward in the city. And food parcels were delivered to every ward in the city. And I know a number of elected members, and I want to pay tribute to them as well. At this point, actually did stand up and do a lot of that work themselves in their wards. You know, so including myself, I did a lot of work in volunteering at that time when it was really needed. So I think we've already started all of that work, Councillor Galton, and we can only learn and improve things as we go forward. But the work that we've really needed to focus on through locality working is our priority neighbourhoods, who have been hit even harder during COVID times. They'd suffered, you know, more than any other communities in what they've you know, had to put up with through the COVID-19. So it's quite right that we prioritise the work with those neighbourhoods first. But I'm sure, you know, as has been expressed by Councillor Galton and Councillor Lamb, the work is excellent that's ongoing, and the people who work in the communities teams who are delivering this are also delivering some excellent outcomes. So thank you to all of them as well, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, what we know is that work will need to continue at pace with everything that is unfolding at the moment. So thank you for the really excellent update on the work that is taking place at the moment, and support for everyone knowing that the work will need to continue. With that, can we agree the recommendations of the report and move on to your last item, item 14?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The last item for me today is the item 14, which is a report requesting phase 2 approval to continue with group repair in Holbeck. And I'm sure members of the Executive Board, we've brought previous reports on the progress of phase 1 of that group repair, and it's brought about some significant improvements in that area. If you get the opportunity to look through the report, there is some really good photographs of how the area has improved as well, so it brings it to life a little bit for us again in that report. We did improve 153 properties. Their fuel costs were significantly reduced, and one of the other things we did alongside the housing improvements were the improvements to the bin yards that have traditionally been very difficult for us to keep clear and keep used as just for refuse. And some of the photographs do demonstrate how well that those have been transformed. And now we find that in the poorest areas in our city, that actually they are using those facilities really well, and recycling's happening in those areas, which you know, is again testament to the improvement in that area. So phase 2 hopes to improve a further 150 properties by improving with new roofs, windows and doors, and external wall insulation. And the funding is through 2.6 million from the government and some HRA funding and other contributions as well. So I'd ask that Executive Board approve the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Thank you, Chair. There's a recurring theme which I'll try and fix as we go along the agenda, but I'm happy to support this paper as well. It's a worthwhile investment, I think.
We're enjoying the theme, Alan. Don't worry. Thank you. Councillor Galton.
No comments, Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Mulherron, did I see your hand up?
Thank you. Sorry, just really wanted to also say how welcome this is in terms of the carbon savings. So we know it's going to have a massive impact in tackling fuel poverty in these homes, but also huge benefits in terms of carbon reductions as well.
Just to add, having been to visit properties where work has taken place, the impact on the quality of life is just phenomenal. And in terms of confidence, and the neighbourhood, it really is such important work. So thank you very much for the full update and for the work that's happening. Can we agree the recommendations for item 14? That moves on to my portfolio. Item 15 is an update on the situation in terms of our preparedness for leaving the European Union. It seems a long time ago to this time last year when we were going through all of those negotiations in Parliament in particular. We're very conscious that we wanted to bring to Executive Board an update report just on where we are. Obviously, Tom has a role, a national role in the transition arrangements. I sit on one of the local government association boards, hearing updates from ministers as well. And just to let the Executive Board know that we have had a cross-party working group on these matters to make sure that we are as up to speed as we can be on these. I'd like to hand over to Tom, who is going to give us an update on where we are. And obviously, we all know the clock is ticking. We are now past the middle of October, and it's really only a handful of weeks away till the end of December. So, Tom, if you could give us an update, and particularly if you're able to reflect back some of the work that we've been jointly doing with the business community around the issues that are raised.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to remind everyone, we had the 5-point plan that Exec Board approved quite a bit of time ago, pre-COVID, on maintaining momentum on major projects and schemes, supporting businesses and key institutions like universities, creating a more tolerant and united city, securing devolution, which we've done, and providing confident outward-looking leadership with Leeds as an international city. Obviously, we have had the withdrawal of the UK from the EU that happened on the 31st of January, and then the transition period up to the end of this year, up to the 31st of December. And during this period, the UK and the EU have been negotiated the future relationship building on the political declaration that was agreed back in October between the UK and EU. And that negotiation covers trade, transport, energy, visa-free travel and security. There won't be an extension to the transition period. This was one of the key potential developments, and that's been agreed by the government. So we are heading out completely by the 1st of January next year. And so a reasonable worst case scenario has been worked up by the government that does, in any of the cases, show that there will need to be additional checks for imports and exports. And one of the big developments, I guess, since we last discussed this, is that a campaign has been launched by government to get business as ready as possible for those arrangements, whether that's under an agreed free trade deal or under WTO arrangements. There has also been work to obviously make sure that the settlement scheme element of that work has been progressing. We have had to pause some of that local work that we've been doing to help people during the pandemic, but we've just reopened services to have a free ID check-in service in Merrion in the city centre. And so far, of the 38,880 applications for settlement status, 35,330 have received a decision. We, as the leader said, I think probably the main two things for Exec Board for me to leave you with are, first of all, the need to help vulnerable people apply for the EU settlement scheme, and the Home Office have just released some more funding for this, and we've just heard that St Vincent's have successfully applied for that, so we'll be wanting to help support St Vincent's in that work. And secondly, really it's all about the business community and the risks that there are to the way that this will hit individual businesses and the economy, and also obviously the opportunities as well that could be released by this new arrangement. I held a meeting, one of the regular meetings that we have with the business representative organisations and a range of different businesses this morning, actually, to discuss Brexit. It does feel like slightly a sort of a working holiday from the COVID discussions that we've been having, but it's probably as important to get this right for the economy over the next few weeks, given that we are heading out of the EU. And I think what became clear is that some sectors do feel pretty settled and pretty more aware of what needs to happen in terms of things like professional services and the legal sector. And particularly, I think the food retail, who have probably had COVID as a dry run at what will happen as we exit the EU, looking at supply chains in particular and making sure that arrangements are in place. And we heard from one of our very major food retail organisations today that they feel pretty confident about the arrangements that they need to have in place. Obviously, there are large numbers of businesses who don't feel prepared, and I hit, as we are with both the pandemic and Brexit, and are faced with a situation where they are under intense pressure on keeping going because of COVID, and are not either willing or able at the moment to get themselves ready to leave. So our discussion was all about making sure that we keep communicating with government about the risks around that particular situation. We also work on the ground with businesses, and particularly the LEPS Business Growth Hub, to provide a source of advice and support for businesses. And we were focusing very much on the practical, which are the forms you need, in which sector, in which country you're trading with. And we'll continue to do that work. A bid for further resource has gone in from our Business Growth Hub into the centre, and we all agreed that we would support that bid this morning from all the business rep organisations and others. So it's not yet clear, of course, what's going to happen with the negotiations. If we get to a free trade deal, then things could be very different. And although you'll draw your own conclusions from the media reports of what's happening, it does appear that things are slightly closer than they were last time we discussed this, but we'll have to plan for every eventuality as usual. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Lamb, do you want to comment on this paper?
Yes, please. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think when you read through it, the conclusion that you draw, with some exceptions, is that in the main, businesses are quite well prepared and resilient for whatever's going to come from the negotiations. And I suppose if there's a disappointment in the report, it's almost there's a pessimism running through it. And one of the reasons Brexit has been such a mess, and I say this as someone who voted to remain, is that so many people were so reluctant to accept the result. And now there's almost a feeling that some of those people almost want it to be a disaster to be proven right, where it doesn't have to be inevitable that this is all negative outcomes. There are opportunities. I was pleased to hear Tom refer to those, but I think we need to big them up and say this is a great city with great businesses that are resilient and have got a huge amount to offer the whole world, including the European Union. And we don't see it as being inevitable that this is a bad thing. Many of us may have wished it was different, but it's not. We are leaving. We have left. The transition period ends come what may at the end of the year. And it's our duty to do everything possible to be positive, optimistic, and to make it a success. So that's my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think all the way through the discussions, we've always talked about the obviously the challenges, but we have made reference repeatedly to making sure that any opportunities are seized. But I think the difficulty you have to acknowledge, Councillor Lamb, is that we're not getting the clarity we need from government about what is going to be happening over the next few weeks. And we're nearly at the end of the period, or I think we've probably gone beyond it in terms of the negotiations. And I think all of us would agree that it leaves us with great difficulty in terms of how we can prepare for what comes next. So whilst I would always want to talk up the prospects of the city, which we do whenever we are able to, there are some profound questions still to be resolved, and they will inevitably have a major impact on us as a city. It's a very, very difficult period in time. So I hope you will acknowledge that there is some concern and frustration, and businesses are reflecting that to us. They're real worries about what the next few weeks and months are going to mean in an incredibly difficult situation for the future economy of our country. And I wouldn't want to minimise those concerns in any way, shape or form. One of the things that we have been doing is making sure that we keep the conversations going with all our long-term partners wherever they are in the world. And that includes within Europe. Whatever the administrative arrangements, we will remain a proud European city, and we have a great deal in common with our partner cities across Europe. And I'm delighted to say that those relationships remain strong, and we will continue to work with them, whatever comes forward over the next few weeks, not least because we have such an exchange of people who are living in our city and Leeds people who are living across Europe. And it's really important that we put their needs absolutely at the top of everything that we're doing. But this is a very difficult situation, made obviously much worse by the pandemic and all of the impacts that is having on us as individuals in health, but also the economic situation that's facing us. So if we could note those comments and ask Councillor Galton if he'd like to come in.
Well, I'm glad you got in there first, Councillor Blake. I can't get over Councillor Lamb's assertion that it's our duty to be positive. It's not our duty to be positive, and this paper is actually one which has been written by many council officers who are responsible for delivering benefits to our city across a whole plethora of services, and they're having to make contingencies, and you can't make some of the contingencies which are being prepared for positive. And just to back Councillor Blake up, we have to listen to the people and businesses that are out there, and it's great if some of those businesses feel that they're in a good position with what's happening with COVID and what is due to happen with Brexit. That's great, but we need to be able to listen and respond appropriately for those that aren't in a good position. And this paper basically emphasises that we can do all that we can with what we know, but because we know very little, thanks to the lack of progress in delivering the oven-ready deal which was promised, we're not in the best position we could be for the people of Leeds as employers or employees or simply as citizens. And you can't really make that any more positive.
Thank you for those comments. Can we agree the recommendations of the report? I'm sure we will need to keep bringing these reports to Executive Board over the next few cycles to keep us up to date with the situation as it develops. Thank you. Can we move on to item 16, which is the, again, in my portfolio, review of the statues in Leeds in response to Black Lives Matter. You will all recall the situation as a result of the death of George Floyd, the situation that developed in Bristol, and our response to that. And I was really thrilled that Alderwoman Alison Lowe, a great friend to all of us, stepped up and volunteered her time and her great expertise to lead a review team that she helped put together to look into the background for our many statues across the city, really to us understand why we have them, what their background is, and how we take them forward, recognising that there are many unsung heroes from our history that haven't had such recognition. I should also congratulate Alison on winning a well-deserved Legacy Award on Sunday evening. So congratulations for that as well, Alison. And I'm very pleased to say that Alison has come to join us today to give us an update on the outcomes of the review, which are laid out in the Exec Board paper, and to look at ways that we will move forward to celebrate the many achievements, but also a real commitment to raising public awareness about our heritage and our history. So if I could hand over to Alison, thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to see you all again. It's even better that it's only this once, because I do not miss you all in the way that because it's so bad at the minute. I don't envy you the terrible job that you've got, but it's also in very good hands. So yeah, I was really delighted to be asked to serve the city once again by Councillor Judith Blake, and I was ably supported by Clooney and his team in understanding the scope of the task, putting together with the group some terms of reference, which was agreed by the leader, and forming the group, which I have to name because they were all outstanding. They did everything for free. They gave their time and their expertise. So Dr. Simon Morgan, Dr. Emily Zobel-Marshall, Dr. Stephen Basteo, James Rhodes, Martin Hamilton from Leeds Civic Trust, Jane Boyru, and as I say, Clooney and his team, and also Joe Williams, who kindly gave me lots of information and source materials around 18 Park Road, the frieze there, which is referred to in the building in the report. So the report, which I'm sure you have all written, you've all read, tries to capture the current situation with statutory in Leeds, and gives a bit of a history of some of that statutory, and we tried to be pragmatic about things like the nymphs. Obviously, we would have preferred not just seeing the nymphs, but we recognised their place in the statutory of Leeds. But we particularly wanted to understand those statues that we felt were contentious, and that particularly focused on Queen Victoria and Sir Robert Peel and the Lord Wellington, the Duke of Wellington. And what we did is we did quite a lot of digging into their histories, understood the contributions as well as the potential questionable sides to their stories. And we brought that to a meeting of the statue group, and we discussed that at length and came to a conclusion together that even though there were questions to be answered, actually we did not have a statue of the standard of Edward Colston. So that was right at the beginning, that was our reflection, but we wanted to get the people of Leeds engaged, and as you know, we did a big consultation exercise, and 800 and odd people responded, of which we analysed the 772, which are spoken about in the report. What was clear to us is that only 3% of all the respondents wanted to remove a specific statue, and only 10% of the overall number wanted any change to the current statutory in terms of removal or some other action. And what we also found from our review was that 55% of those people who responded wanted no change and definitely didn't want any removal. But what also was clear is that people felt that the stories of the people who were represented in statue form needed to be updated and modernised, and that we needed a 21st century lens on those people and their stories. And that really forms the backbone of the recommendations to you today. And we also felt that there were huge numbers of brilliant people in Leeds who also needed to be recognised in their groups, not necessarily as individuals, but we wanted to make sure that we incorporated into our recommendations a plea that the city would look for ways to recognise groups of people who had contributed over the years. So the Irish community, African Caribbean, Southeast Asian community, for example, and hopefully there will be opportunities to do that in the future, notwithstanding the current financial difficulties. So the recommendations 1 to 10 are in the report, and I'm really happy to answer any questions that you might have. Just to say, it was a delight. We had lots of really brilliant conversations. I'm an historian, I've got 2 degrees in history. It reminded me how much I love history, but it also reminded me that history has its dark side too, and we need to keep on revisiting that history to understand it in today's language and through the lens of today, so that we can make sense of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Lamb, would you like to comment?
I would, please, Chair, and likewise, it's very nice to see Alderman Lowe back, who I have a lot of time for, and I have to congratulate you on making such a fist of what in sporting terms would be described as a hospital pass, I think, from the Leader of Council. And I think what this all shows is the folly of knee-jerk reactions to things. I think if you look at the report that's been written by officers, not Councillor Lowe's report, my summation, channeling my inner Churchill, would be that never in the history of this council has so many words been used to avoid getting to the point that when people were asked their view on this, no one was really interested. That was the overwhelming response. And I would share Alderman Lowe's conclusion that we should do everything we can to celebrate people from all of the communities of Leeds and acknowledge the contributions they've made to our city. But you can't help escaping the conclusion that I suspect the vast majority of people in this city would take was that this was a complete waste of time and money. The responses to the survey show that, and the waffle in the report from officers simply backs that up. So it is what it is. It's been done. Let's move on.
Well, that's a very disappointing response given the situation that we were dealing with at the time, and looking back to what was actually happening on the ground. Can I move on to Councillor Galton?
Yes, thanks, Chair. It's interesting. The people who have got involved, just because they have a reasonable attitude, doesn't show that they had a lack of interest. They did have an interest, and the fact that actually the majority of people came to a reasonable consensus is actually a really good indication of how well engaged the people of Leeds are in terms of reviewing our future as well as our past in context. I know Councillor Lamb has talked about how this has been a waste of time and a waste of money, but we intend to be, well, we were going to be a city of culture, to get back to the Brexit paper, but now we're sorry, a capital of culture, European capital of culture. Now we're going to be a city of culture in 2023. And this kind of exercise is key to us demonstrating that we take culture seriously, and statuary is all about celebrating either issues or individuals. And as we look forward, we need to look back to think about how we might want to do things differently in the future, and how we might want to revisit the past and give it some kind of reinterpretation. I mean, that's the whole point behind museums. And I'm assuming Councillor Lamb doesn't think museums are a waste of time in terms of people having access to culture and learning from it and taking those lessons into the future. I think this exercise has been really well done, and I congratulate Alderman Lowe in terms of producing a document which is academically pleasing as well as socially. And I look forward to even more outcomes coming out of it in terms of Leeds going forward to 2023 and celebrating what it is as a city, which is one which is very diverse. And in terms of statuary, considering that the majority of them which are there historically have been paid for by quite rich people, it would be really good if that levelling up could be achieved artistically, and that some of the communities in Leeds which have been overlooked could be celebrated even more in time for 2023.
Thank you for your comments, and can I apologise to Alison for both Councillor Lamb and Councillor Galton reverting to calling you Alderman instead of Alderwoman.
It's okay. They're obviously not very modern.
As we're having a discussion about diversity.
Yeah.
I can't take responsibility for them, but apologies for that. But I just want to again repeat my comments. Thank you. It was an extraordinarily tense time as we have reflected on, and your calm and approach and your reputation did us great service at a very difficult time. So thank you very much for that, and for the fact that it was purely voluntary on your behalf and all the members of the reference board as well. So could I ask you to give our personal thanks to all of them as well. Obviously, the recommendations are to look at further work, and Clooney is on the call for that. We haven't had any questions about that, so I think in the interests of time, unless Clooney, there's anything particularly you want to refer to, I'll ask if we can agree the recommendations of the report and move on in that case. So thank you, everybody, and thank you again, Alderwoman Lowe, for giving us your time.
Thank you. And I could just say finally that one of the reasons why this was such a joy to do is because the people of Leeds, I think, trusted the council to do the right thing. And so if there wasn't lots and lots of thousands of people engaging, it's because they trusted the council to represent their views and their wishes, and you have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'm sure you will be delighted to be able to drop out of the call now and continue what you're doing.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Can we move on to item 17, which is the COVID report, the update report, which obviously came as a late paper. We tried to, and I'd just like to thank opposition members for agreeing to accept late papers on this item. But as we know, even though it was a late paper, still it's such a fast moving item for us. I think what would be helpful, the report is very full. We've been doing as much as we can to keep members updated through the regular updates that we send out several times a week still, because of the nature of the situation and the fact that it's fast moving. But what we do know is that we are watching the unfolding of the introduction of the tier system across the north, and I think it would be helpful if we could update you on the latest discussions around this with regard to West Yorkshire. What I want to stress is that we haven't actually had conversations with ministers, despite the suggestion from national politicians that we have. We had a meeting with that was chaired by Luke Hall last Friday, who has taken over from Simon Clarke as the Regions Minister, but that was primarily with Jenny Harris, the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, just exchanging discussions about the public health statistics that we have. There was a suggestion that we might have had a meeting with the Secretary of State for MHCLG yesterday, but that didn't take place. There was a discussion with chief executives and officials that I can ask Tom to update us on. The outcome of those discussions is that West Yorkshire authorities, and of course that includes Leeds, remain in Tier 2, which is the category very high level of concern, not Tier 3, which is designated as very high level of concern. That's the situation we remain in today. Clearly, there has been another significant event today in that South Yorkshire have collectively agreed to move into Tier 3, following on from the situation that we had with Manchester yesterday, and Lancashire and Liverpool at an earlier stage. So Tom, if you could just move us to updating us on the outcome of the meeting yesterday. We've obviously got Victoria on the line as well, and I know you'll all want to join me in asking Victoria to thank her team, as well as all officers from around the council who still continue to do incredible work to help support us through these stages of, unfortunately, seeing an increase in the infections yet again as we go forward. So Tom, if I could take you first, please, to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just with in the interest of time, I guess just a quick update on the infection rate to save Victoria having to do it. So it's about 373 at the moment. It's been stabilising and reducing slightly over the last few weeks. But when we published the report, it was 404. Although it does fluctuate a bit, so it could creep back up a little bit and then creep back down over the next few days. The positivity rate is pretty stable at 13.7 as well. This is the number of people who test positive per 100 per 100 tests, and the rate in people over 59, which is another key indicator that the government have started to focus on very specifically, and we have, is increasing. It's not increasing at an exponential rate by any means, but it is edging up as the cohort of younger people in the city, the case rates reduce, and that was obviously right across the city, but the fact that we have a net increase of about 25 to 30,000 students into the city at the time that the universities start did have an impact on the Leeds figures. So generally speaking, the fact that we are high but stable and slightly reducing has, together with the fact that hospitalisations are increasing, but they're not increasing at a rate that is overwhelming the NHS, has kept us in tier 2 at the moment. But it's very much a watching brief for all of us, not just government, but ourselves. And always we've been trying to strike this balance between keeping the virus under control and keeping people being able to live their lives and the economy going as well, but with public health at the forefront of our minds and our actions. The work that Victoria and the team have been doing has been incredibly successful with our NHS colleagues, with our third sector colleagues, and with the council officers from right across the board. We have been keeping, despite the scale of the city, with around 250 care homes, 270 schools, over 2,000 pubs, restaurants and hospitality establishments. We've been keeping cases limited to individual or 1 or 2 cases rather than outbreaks and clusters, and this is a critical way of keeping the virus from spiralling out of control. So lots of work that that sector has done in particular to get COVID safe and COVID ready has meant that we have worked extremely well with them over the last few weeks, of which some members on the call are even members of that sector. We've worked incredibly well with them to keep that work going. But there are big stresses and strains given the restrictions that are in place, particularly I think the 10 p.m. curfew, which has been mentioned by many businesses to us as something that isn't necessarily the easiest to manage, particularly if you're a restaurant or a pub that serves food, and particularly if you don't want everybody to sort of leave en masse at times. So again, we've been collectively managing that as well as possible, but we have been making representations about that. The key issue for us is whether we stay in tier 2 or go into tier 3. And I think tier 3 would bring extra restrictions on pubs and bars, closing that didn't serve main meals, and a range of other potential restrictions around gyms, leisure centres, public libraries, even non-essential retail. Most places that have gone into tier 3 have kept the restrictions to pubs and bars that don't serve main meals and betting shops, casinos, etc., but not closed the full range of venues that I mentioned. And there has been some, if you like, compensation, business support packages in place for those places as well, as you'll have picked up. We also are getting some support for being in tier 2, £3 per head for us as a city, which adds up to just under £2.4 million, which is welcome. That would go up to £8 per head if we went into tier 3. We are very committed to work with our northern core city partners and our West Yorkshire colleagues to make the case for business packages of compensation, not just in tier 3, but in tier 2. Commitments to locally controlled test and trace activities that we know are more effective than the pure national system. It needs to be linking up with the national system and working well, but that's the ask that we've put forward. Furlough payments not falling below the minimum wage, a clear entrance and exit strategy to tiered lockdowns, enhanced and resourced local enforcement powers, and a consistency and transparency of support packages. So that's the current dialogue that we're in with government at the moment. As the leader said, we are not in a position where we are moving out of tier 2, and we continue to do what's needed to keep the virus under control, working with our partners, and we'll keep you updated if that changes. And obviously we are keeping an eye on the numbers every day.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Victoria, is there anything you'd like to add at this stage?
No, Chair, nothing. I think Tom's covered everything comprehensively. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb, could I hand over to you?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, can I just start by adding our thanks from our group to Victoria and her team. I think she has done a phenomenal job in the city, in the circumstances. I know it's not only her, and there's a wide team behind her as well. And also thank her for keeping our group so well up to date and well informed with everything that's going on. We're very grateful for that. Next, Chair, a couple of questions for you, and I would like to come back when you've responded. I don't know if I misunderstood what you said, but you said there had been no talks with government, which my understanding is that's not the case. And Tom seems to suggest that was not the case. I'm led to believe there were talks only yesterday with the government, unless, again, I've misunderstood or been misinformed. I'm sure you'll tell me. And I am led to believe that you've personally had one-to-one meetings with Matt Hancock to discuss the situation. So again, if I'm misinformed, I'm sure you'll tell me. But also, I wonder if you could clarify what your position is. Do you think we should be heading for tier 3? Do you think there should be a national lockdown, as has been suggested? And how would we feel if Leeds was in a much better position and we were being asked to lock down for other parts of the country? So they're my initial questions to you, Chair. I would like to come back with a couple of more general points, if I may.
Alan, the issue is meetings with the leaders of the councils. That's the point I've been making, and the point that other leaders have made as well. And it's that, you know, from my point of view, the decision makers are the leaders of the councils, reflecting the councils themselves. That is the difference, and in, you know, between what government says and what actually we need to happen on the ground. So I hope that clarifies that point. You know, there's a big difference between officials talking to officials. And I wouldn't ever suggest that Tom would make a decision without referring it back to the council. That's the way things work. I've had 2 telephone conversations with Matt Hancock. Is that classed as is that what you're classing as a meeting? I'm not sure where you're getting this information from, but again, you know, let's just keep absolutely clear in terms of what the process is and should be. And I think it's that misinterpretation and the really difficult situation that I'm sure every elected member would agree that finding out information through the media is not the appropriate way to move things forward. I'm involved in negotiations. We obviously have with other leaders from West Yorkshire between ourselves in terms of making sure that we keep an eye on what the health situation is. This fundamentally is a health pandemic, and we have to make sure that we keep a very close eye on what is actually happening in our communities. My position remains that talking to our partners in the region, 3 of our local authorities have been under restrictions for over 10 weeks now. And their concern is that those restrictions on their own haven't had the desired impact. And I think if you talk to local authorities right across the north in particular that have had those restrictions, of course Leicester was the first one that went in, is that they haven't had the impact that everyone hoped they would, but they have brought significant concerns to the business community. So the concern we've got is how we navigate our way through this, so we don't have the worst of both worlds, with restrictions having a real impact on the economic base and our ability, therefore, to recover, but they don't have the desired impact in cutting the chain of infection. Those are the discussions that we're having, and I'm really pleased that we have got examples from across West Yorkshire of where intensive work has happened on the ground, working with households. And it's those elements that we're really keen to work on in terms of building up what works. So you will have seen our demands around test and tracing, making it much more local. We've been absolutely consistent all the way through this, that is what needs to happen. And it's of real concern to us that our concerns, our demands, if you like, in that area haven't been met. So we do recognise that governments are beginning to listen to us and starting to involve an element in the deals around our being able to invest more at a local level. And we do welcome that, but actually the amount of resource that we need in a very intensive area is incredibly important. I don't think any of us would dispute the expertise we have at a local level through our public health teams, through our environmental health teams, around our ability to actually far better manage the contained framework, getting out, boots on the ground, meeting people in our communities. And we haven't been able to do that to the extent that I believe is required. So again, these are things that we are very keen to talk to government to look at how we can actually work across West Yorkshire to move us forward. But we're in negotiations, Alan. These are really critical times for us going forward, and we expect that we will be asked to have a further meeting with probably officials in the first place. We were expecting a meeting with Robert Jenrick that didn't happen yesterday. We'll wait to see what the outcome of that and move forward appropriately. It would be completely wrong of me at this stage to have an absolutely definitive approach, and I hope you will respect that that things in this agenda change almost on a daily basis. But we hope that we can move forward and have the debate with government that we need to have if they decide that changes need to be made. But at the moment, we are working within Tier 2 to the very best of our ability, as you have heard, to make sure that we continue to work with our partners to interrupt the chain of infection, to bring the infection rate down, make sure that we can help to protect the pressure from the NHS, which is, again, a huge concern for all of us.
Okay, are you happy for me to come back, Councillor Blake?
If you want to.
Yep, thank you. I appreciate the clarification on the meetings and the response you've given. I'm grateful for that. I would like to go to make a wider point. And as I think the only person on this call who actually is running a business and has that experience and is in the hospitality sector and is living and breathing the challenges day in and day out. Firstly, I'd reassure you that others, our group, through our MPs, are lobbying furiously as well. And many of the points that Tom made, I recognise about the challenges to our sector, and please be assured that we're making them strongly as well. Where possible, I think we've seen some unedifying scenes of people trying to play politics with this issue this week, and we need to try and speak with one voice as a city. and as a region to try and make the cases for the things that we need as a council and for the things that our businesses need. And I hope that can be taken on board and that dialogue can continue, and we use all the channels available to us to make those asks of government. I can plea to the council and to the government on behalf of the hospitality sector that tier 2 is not a nice place to be. The ask is that people stay away. The support is non-forthcoming at the moment, and it is not a good place to be. There are things the council could do. If you think about the retail sector, something we could do straight away is abolish parking charges in the city centre, on-street parking charges, until after Christmas. Otherwise, the businesses that are already struggling in the city centre are going to find people will just get in their cars, go to the White Rose Centre, Meadowhall, other places. That's something we could do now. I don't think it would be a huge cost to the city, and at the very least, it's a gesture. It's not going to solve the problem, but it would help. I think we do have to keep pushing. Tier 3 is a concern for a lot of businesses, but there's a long way to go. I note that my one last ask is if Councillor Blake would say if she does support a national circuit breaker or not.
Can I just thank Councillor Lamb for recognising the deep roots of the city in terms of our partnerships. We have incredible partnerships, and if I'm sure Councillor Carter has reflected back to your group the work that we're doing on the Leeds Outbreak Board, real quality work, people coming together, sharing their experiencing, helping us to design the work going forward. And our approach has always been to work as one city, and I recognise that the challenges that you outline. I think you're reflecting the frustration that has come from so many areas who have been in restrictions over the summer and just feel that they haven't had the support from government in terms of their business needs, but equally that it hasn't been having the desired effect. And I think that is the real frustration that has happened. In terms of the circuit breaker, I think there is a real concern growing about how different areas are being picked off against each other. You have to accept that there is a huge confusion around between the different restrictions that are coming in. If you look at somewhere like Wakefield, for example, only went into restrictions last week into tier 2, and then possibly going to be asked to go into different restrictions within, a certain time frame. These are just talking to ordinary people and asking them to really understand what is expected of them has been incredibly difficult moving forward. So I think that the national circuit breaker is an idea that needs to be pursued, and obviously our devolved nations are moving forward in that direction. We've got Wales, Northern Ireland moving forward, recognising that something needs to happen. Obviously, we're looking at the situation as it unfolds, but at the moment, my understanding is that the government don't have any intention of moving forward, certainly in the public statements they're making. But I listen to what Boris Johnson says with great care, and I think he's trying to keep the door open and recognising if the infection rates do continue to spread and spread over a wider area, that this is a situation that he will have to reflect on very seriously himself, particularly given the scientific advice that he was given that should have been a course of action. That's the position that we're in. But at the moment, we have to do what we can with the circumstances we have to get the best outcomes for the people of our city. I'm glad you recognise the work that is going on to help us to move forward in that regard. and we will continue to be robust in the advice that we give back to government in terms of what we believe works on the ground. That is where we are at this moment in time. But I can reassure you that we have been listening very carefully to the voices of businesses who do feel in a very difficult position, that they're seeing their businesses being hit, but they're not getting the support that they know that they need. And there is real despair and real concern for the future viability of so many businesses now. We need to take this seriously and keep coming together, as you said, of one city to protect the health of the people, but also to make sure that we do the very best to help protect the economy and ultimately people's jobs as we go forward. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. I think one of the things that comes across particularly through that discussion is just how very difficult it is to be in a leadership position right now and be having discussions with a government which is determined to stick to a COVID response regime, which in so many ways has been proven to be, if not ineffective, then a lot of the time based on gestures. I'm sure Councillor Lamb is as frustrated as many other hospitality businesses in terms of the efficacy of the 10 o'clock curfew. And I think the work that the council has done with the hospitality sector to look at that and perhaps put proposals forward to government which relax the specifications on it so that the control on drinking can be achieved at the same time as creating a much better environment for both businesses and those using them. I think that is the constructive way forward. At the moment, though, it just feels really like devolution has no meaning in terms of localities being in charge of their own destiny and the model that they are able to introduce to confront the virus, and for any fairness to be understood, not just by the leaders that are representing the people, but by the people themselves in terms of the level of support that they should expect in a universal way across all the different communities that the government is having discussions with. And I think one of the things that would help really a lot in these discussions is to have some understanding of what the thresholds are for going in and for going out. Because at the moment, it seems to be very much about individual opinion as opposed to statistics and data on the ground. And unless these agreements are actually fully integrated with an admission and an understanding of how to improve the test and trace model by enabling local authorities to do what they want to do and actually put money against it. I'm not sure what the £3 a head gets you in a tier 2 as opposed to the £8 a head in a tier 3 in terms of investment in the infrastructure. But it would be really helpful for people to understand what they as citizens are being asked to commit to by their leaders on their behalf, because I think then we'll get far better observance and commitment to those if they feel like they have somewhere to aim to come out of those restrictions and get back to facing a Christmas which is somewhat like normal. And I hope that is coming out in the discussions, whether it's between Councillor Blake and Robert Jenrick, or whether it's between Tom Reardon and a Whitehall Mandarin. I'm hoping that kind of clarity is something which is being sought.
Okay, thank you. Tom, would you like to come back at all?
No, just to reinforce that the way, everybody knows, but it's worth reflecting for people who don't, that the way we work in the council is that if we have official level discussions, then they will not be decisive. The decisive discussions are with between leaders and ministers. And the official level discussions can really help prepare the ground and have as robust a conversation as often ministers and leaders do. But at the end of the day, the decision makers are ministers and leaders. So just worth reiterating that. And, you know, we are trying to, we are genuinely in a very, very challenging situation by any stretch of the imagination, with the financial position that the council's in, the challenge that every organisation virtually in the city has got, and, you know, in the middle of a pandemic. So we're doing our best, and I think you know, we've got to try and just keep looking at the numbers, keep talking, doing everything that we can to keep the virus down, and but that will be the process for further changes.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Lamb, please do feel free to feed your comments through from your business perspective. We're more than happy to hear your comments from that perspective. Don't ever feel that you can't do that. But obviously we are talking to as many people as we can, but all the way through this, we have gone out on every single briefing we have made to reinforce the fact that we need to keep the public on side with us, you know, in spite of all of the challenges in terms of the confusion of the restrictions, that we want to ask everyone to keep to the basic public health messages, maintaining social distance, wearing face coverings where appropriate, and most importantly, when you're asked to self-isolate, that you do that. And the really important difference, I think, coming from a city like Leeds, is that we recognise, all of us, that people need support to help them to do these things. And that's what we want to put in place, a real system where we can reach out, recognise that asking the lowest paid people in the city to put even further restrictions on themselves and having to make really difficult decisions in terms of their personal lives, in terms of being able to feed their families and do what they know is the right thing by public health. These are the challenges that people are facing day to day. And it's the testament to the work that we do in our city, all of the support work that we were able to do during the first lockdown to reach out and support our most vulnerable has to continue. We will do everything we can to keep you informed every step of the way. It is, as I've said before, paramount that we take everyone with us. These are really difficult and challenging times, but I really believe that we have great teams in place, and we will continue to do everything we can to support particularly the most vulnerable out in our communities. So with that, if we could move the recommendations of the report and go forward to the next item on the agenda, which is the economic recovery framework, which of course is the timing of these papers on the agenda is quite fortunate in this regard. You will see from the paper that we are not presenting a fixed economic recovery plan, but we are laying before you an approach to recovery, which we hope will help us to navigate the very difficult weeks and months ahead, based on the principles around responding, resetting and renewing and building resilience. And we talk a great deal about how resilient the city of Leeds actually is. And we're building all of the work that we're doing going forward around inclusive growth, supporting our communities, supporting people to take advantage of the opportunities that we are creating and will create again. Health and well-being couldn't have been more important to have that at the centre of what we're doing. And of course, our climate emergency, response. We're using these 3 pillars as the foundation for what we do, and moving out and working with our partners right across the city. If I could ask Martin just to give some background to the thinking behind the approach we're taking, and then very happy to take questions.
I think Chair Eve, that's pulled the work together, is on the line, so she's probably better at it than me in terms of covering.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't made aware that Eve was on the line. Thank you. Eve, if you come in, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Martin. So, yes, just to add a little bit of extra context to this, as the leader said, we're proposing an approach here rather than a firm plan. And that's not just because of the implications of COVID-19 in a second wave, but also because of the kind of issues surrounding Brexit and the need for us to be agile and be able to respond on an ongoing basis. So the framework is a way for us to be able to be both responding as we need, but also understanding the challenges and opportunities that we now face, and making sure we've got the right projects and the right partnerships in place to address them. And then thirdly, not losing sight of those 3 key strategies. So you both have the report, but also the economic recovery document that's appended. It does set out the economic context in which we now find ourselves as part of the report. And very briefly, although I know you will all appreciate this, we entered lockdown from a period of strength from an economic perspective. But like all cities, we've been hit very hard by COVID. And we have, as a nation, entered into recession. We have seen a 92% increase in the number of universal credit claimants across the city since March. And we now have more than 42,000 people that are unemployed across Leeds, an 80% increase from the position that we were in when we entered lockdown and when we were near full employment. Some sectors have been hit much harder than others, and we should remember that actually the breadth of the economy in Leeds is an advantage to us. The digital sector is still very strong. It's been resilient through lockdown, and there are some very positive things still happening in that sector, as in health and some parts of food supply. So you'll see that context in the report. And then we put a bit more kind of meat on the bones in there around our response in terms of the activities so far, and some of the things that were discussed at length in the previous item around how we're working with the hospitality sector are very live at the moment, and an example of how we keep responding. In Reset and Renew, we set out some key themes which we start to just set out what the kind of challenges and opportunities are, and where the transformational projects and partnerships are that are already in place in the city that we can build on. So we touch on the labour market, healthy communities, centres, and I know that through scrutiny we've talked a lot about the implications for both the city centre and district centres, and needing to build our understanding of that and into our work. Transport, which has also been something we've discussed at scrutiny over the last few months. Culture and innovation, and touching particularly on culture and innovation as being areas that are of great importance to us in terms of ensuring that we recover well as we go through this. And then obviously building resilience is just where we are very clear about how we're going to tackle some of those main key strategies. The final thing I just wanted to draw attention to is that this is not a replacement of the inclusive growth strategy. We will review the inclusive growth strategy in due course. That will be, this is really the starting point of the conversation, and to allow us to work with the city and our partners across the city to recover well, and to be able to talk not just about some of the really challenging aspects of that we're dealing with, but also to be able to engage in some of the really exciting opportunities that still remain for us in terms of some of the sectors that I mentioned before. And through the Inclusive Growth Delivery Partnership, we will bring the city together, including members who are always invited to be part of that partnership, to explore more some of these issues and to drive forward some of the projects that we're working on together wherever we can, but also to adopt the Social Progress Index, which we intend to use to help measure our progress alongside gross domestic product, which is the more traditional measure of economic progress. So I hope that kind of sets things out clearly enough, Chair.
Thank you, Eve. Thank you for the update. Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you for the report. I think what's missing in this is the here and now, and what more we can do to support businesses right now. And in some ways, when you read the report, while yes, it's a response and an economic recovery framework, it's almost as though the world hasn't changed. And for many businesses, business plans have gone out the window, they've been ripped up, and the here and now, the future is today, tomorrow, this week, next month. Can we make it to Christmas? Can we get to the other side? And I will not hold back on the previous, as on the previous paper, of saying government needs to do more at the moment. And it's not on to say we're going to restrict people's legitimate normal business activities, but we're not going to offer any compensation to go with it. That just isn't right. And I will keep making that case at every opportunity. But we also have to say, as a council, and make sure we've got a clear and robust plan, not only lobbying up, but that we're doing all the things that we can. And I'd repeat my plea and ask that you would at least agree to consider it, Councillor Blake, that we look at abolishing on-street parking charges for the city centre right now through until after Christmas, as a way of helping city centre businesses. I personally haven't been into the city centre since March because I haven't needed to, and I feel guilty every day because normally that's where I'd go for my haircut. When I come to the Civic Hall, there's lots of things and money I'd normally spend that isn't getting spent, and there's lots of people in that position. We have to do what we can to help and support businesses right now. And my challenge would be the framework is fine, but the bit that's missing is here and now, and what more we can do.
Thank you, Councillor Galton.
I had a very long briefing with Eve, and I'm very happy with the report which has been produced, particularly its recognition of future economic development outside of the city centre itself and more in district centres.
Sorry, there's a bit of interference on the call.
Hopefully it's not my son who's self-isolating at home, Councillor Blake.
Did you want to come back, Eve?
Just if I may just come back on the point about the actions we're taking now. So we do tend to report more on those through the coronavirus update, the recovery plan, the previous item, as it were. So just to sort of reassure what we've been doing over the past couple of weeks. So when we concluded the work on the grant funds, we did kind of immediately via the leader write to ask to support to be able to retain the money that was underspent through those grant funds to support business. Although I don't believe we've had a response, but we did immediately write to ask if we could. We've also spent a lot of time with Tom's support talking to the hospitality sector over the last 2 weeks, and they have provided us with some really detailed evidence in the last couple of days, which has really helped us to quantify what the impact is and the differentiator between city centre businesses and those that operate more in the suburbs. And it is fair to say that there is a really differential impact, and particularly that includes on independent retailer impacted, not just hospitality in the city centre. And we're using that evidence that we've gathered as officers to provide into the discussions about why more support is needed for businesses in tier 2 and in tier 3 scenarios. And then the other thing to say is that wherever we have got resources where we can assist, we're doing so. So my colleagues in city centre management continue to look to make sure that all of the communications and signage and everything is well managed in the city centre in particular, but we're also liaising with Peter Mudge around district centres wherever we can. And my team have been leading on the Rediscover Leeds campaign, which had some great success over the summer. but is obviously kind of faced with the restrictions. You're not going to necessarily get the impact in terms of people coming into the city centre for those activities. So just to sort of reassure Councillor Lamb that we are very much engaged in the here and now, but we do also want to make sure that we don't lose sight of the kind of medium and long term.
Okay, thank you. In bringing the discussion to a close, can we just be clear, we don't make policy on the hoof in these meetings. That's not the way that we do business here. And thank you, Eve, for highlighting all of the work that we're doing with businesses across the city centre, but also beyond. This isn't just about the city centre. I think that's the important issue that we have to bear in mind. We will continue the discussions there. The input of our partners is absolutely paramount in helping us to move forward from a very difficult situation. But we're going to go on now to look, not immediately, but in the future section of this report, into the financial circumstances that are facing us as an authority. And I think it's just really poor if Councillor Lamb doesn't understand and recognise the financial challenges that are facing us. And what we are trying to do is work a way forward where we can, whilst working through the situation that the pandemic has left us in terms of our own finances, and making sure that we work across all of our sectors to come up with ways that we can help in the short term, but also mindful that this is going to be an issue for us for many, many months to come. So with that, I will move the recommendations of the report, and that concludes my papers, and I'll move on to Councillor Lewis, please, who will first of all talk about the clean air zone under item 19.
Thank you, Leader. And the first paper I have is the Improving Air Quality Update. We've been going 2.5 hours and I could talk about this forever, but I will make a few headline points in introducing this paper, which, first of all, I think we need to recognise that the point we're at is a positive one, in that ourselves and the government, who required a charging clean air zone in the first place, have reviewed the evidence and come to the conclusion that we now have legally compliant air quality in Leeds. We've recognised both the air quality data that's been monitored and also the mix of vehicles on the road at the moment, and both individuals and businesses have moved over to low emission vehicles at a far quicker rate than I think anybody expected, and that has to be good news. We are now in a position where we are recommending that we don't go ahead with the charging clean air zone. That is been, in terms of the late items that were circulated to go alongside that paper, we've had a minister write to Judith and I and confirm that position, and we received that yesterday, or dated yesterday, so that's been circulated for today's meeting. We have never accepted as an administration that reaching legal levels of air quality is a position we feel is a good enough level of air quality. We don't believe there is a safe level of pollution, and therefore from moving forward, we want to update our air quality strategy, and I've spoken to Councillor Barry Anderson about making sure that work is referred to scrutiny at some point for a full discussion about, without a charging clean air zone, what we can do to see the continued improvement in air quality. We know, like I say, that we've got more ultra low emission vehicles out on the road in Leeds than ever before. Some of our requests to government around the point where we recognise we no longer need a charging clean air zone are to allow us to continue to retain some of the Clean Air Fund to continue that improvement. I'm pleased that they've accepted our request for support for the taxi and private hire sector. I am less pleased that they have not accepted our request for the HGVs and other large vehicles for us to continue issuing grants to owners that want to switch over to a low emission Euro 6 vehicle. Our figures, and are set out in the report, show that 80% of HGVs are now of a Euro 6 quality. We believe that figure could be higher, and whilst we will continue to process the grants we've got, we thought there was an opportunity to offer a period where the grants were could continue. We could start offering new grants, but the government haven't accepted that. This was, again, just to be clear, this wasn't money that was coming into the council for clean air work. This was money that we would give directly to businesses, and any money that wasn't spent on grants will be returned to the government. So we'll continue working with the government on how we can spend the Clean Air Zone money. So I think in terms of where we are, we will continue those negotiations. We will update our air quality strategy. We'll continue working with everybody in Leeds with a vehicle on the road to improve air quality, and like to put it on record that those businesses that have changed their vehicles over to ultra low emission vehicle, it's really positive that change has happened, and it's clearly led to, like I say, the agreement between ourselves and the government. I just wanted to make one final point around the Clean Air Fund and the work that has happened. Because we are under ministerial direction, all our work on a charging clean air zone has been funded by a single purpose government grant. We either spent money on clean air zone or returned it to the government. That is, we would have not, none of the work that has been done has been funded out of money that could be spent on any other council services. And had we been in a position that we thought we would have been, where we were turning on the cameras either earlier this year, last month, or earlier next year, any of the money we would have raised from that would have returned to the council general fund. It's all been spent on clean air initiatives. I think as we come onto the budget position, I think it's important to underline that this has neither taken money away from general services nor has a cancellation of the charging seen a reduction in money available for services. I will leave it there, Chair, and see if members have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lewis. Alan, Councillor Lamb.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. As I was the scrutiny chair when this was first being looked into by scrutiny, so to be honest, it's not a huge surprise to me that we are where we are now. The couple of questions I would have for Councillor Lewis is we're left in a strange position where we've got 3 carbon reduction targets, one from the government for 2050, the official council target, which is for 2030, and then the same council leaders in West Yorkshire who've set a target of 2038. So I wonder if you can explain how that is going to work in practice. And then my second question is, can you give us a guarantee that the infrastructure will not be used to introduce a congestion charge into Leeds?
Okay, on the first question, just to be clear, Alan, the charging clean air zone wasn't about CO2 greenhouse gases emission. It was about particulate pollution that was emitted. So I can't answer your question directly today, and I'm sure we can ask officers to give you a briefing on that question. We've always been mindful in terms of the clean, reducing particulate pollution, that the nothing we did would have a negative impact on our carbon reduction targets. We've always been clear about that. But in terms of the specific questions, we will arrange a briefing for you on that one. And on congestion charge, absolutely. The government paid for the cameras, so any future use will have to be agreed with the government. But at the moment, we have no plans for a congestion charge.
Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Well, this was a really disappointing decision that's come from the Labour administration for my group, considering that we put a white paper forward 11 years ago asking for this kind of zone to be set up, and the incoming Labour administration signed up for it and said they would, and then of course they took a decade to do nothing about it. Then they got told to do it by the government because the government thought they were going to get taken to court, and now the government says, oh, we're not interested anymore because we're not going to get taken to court, and you go, fair enough. And it just sort of emphasises to us that there's no real commitment to actually saying that this is a priority. It's always something which is a reaction as opposed to something which is central to this administration's policy on climate change and improving our environment. And in terms of the direct issue around where we've got to so far, Councillor Lewis can be proud of the achievements that have been made through the fact that having a climate action zone coming means that people are catalysed into doing more, and they're actually given an incentive to improve what they're doing. And all these new vehicles that are out there that are actually putting less pollutants into the atmosphere are a testament to that urgency which was required because of the zone. Now that that zone is going, there was a real danger that dynamism and that speed of change is going to dissipate because nobody has got an incentive to continue going forward. And that's highlighted somewhat in the report by saying, oh, we do hope those people that have upgraded don't now get a profit on these high-end vehicles and then end up getting a diesel engined car again. Because they know they're not going to be subject to any kind of restrictions. So there's a real danger on that. And I would like to know what the council intends to do about that, instead of just saying, oh, well, we're going to work with Councillor Anderson and his scrutiny board to think about it. It would be really good to know how you're going to keep that rate of improvement going and make sure that the people of Leeds are incentivised to continue to change at the rate that we have, and the businesses of Leeds as well. And in terms of the infrastructure that's there, it's good that you're not going to introduce congestion charging. That's good to get that confirmed. But why aren't we use that equipment to have a gauge of how well we are doing as a city and how that rate of change in terms of new vehicles coming on stream within our communities is actually still carrying on? They'd be really good to monitor that level of improvement. So can we think about doing that, please? And well, that'll do for now. It's just a really disappointing decision that's being made, and for it all to be based on legal issues as opposed to what we actually feel and want to do is quite disappointing and ironic, considering that the law which is being mentioned is European Union law, and the government was telling us that they weren't going to be told what to do by Europe anymore, and they were going to have their own ideas. And it doesn't seem that actually having clean air is one of them which is high on their priorities right now.
Okay, there's quite a lot there. I assume Councillor Galton had connection problems during my introduction because he quite clearly didn't hear a word I said. And like I say, I will put that down to, possible technical problems. So let me be absolutely clear about one thing. The legal limit, which is set by MPs in Parliament, not by us as a council, is the one that the charging regime was based on. We do not believe, and again, if you want to turn your volume up, Councillor Galton, we do not believe that the legal limit is an acceptable level of air quality. However, we are in a position where that is a basis for legal charging regime. You had 5 years in government where you could have changed that and nothing happened. So turning back to our actions as a council, and again, I can assure you that we will continue to monitor both air quality and information about vehicles on the road. The legislation hasn't gone away, so should the position worsen, then we will have to go back to the charging regime. We will continue our work. It is disappointing that our request for further money to continue investment in vehicles has been turned down, but we will continue the work we can do on improving air quality. We have the largest fleet of electric vehicles of any council in the country, and I think that shows our own commitment as an organisation. We will continue to press for public transport improvements that we know reduce particulate-based pollution. Again, this was always based around clean air legislation on particulate-based pollution. We have another strand of work around reducing the city's climate emissions, and we look forward to working on that forward. So I will speak up in case people can't hear, but we do not believe that the legal limits are good enough, and we will continue our work. And I hope you heard that point, Stuart.
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's anything to add to that. Councillor Lewis, I'm assuming you don't want to bring officers in at this point. I think you've covered all the issues that have been raised.
I think so. And like I say, we will be bringing, obviously we had a review into the situation, and we will be bringing a revised air quality strategy forward along with wider consultation to a future executive board meeting. And like I say, I'm at the Climate Emergency Committee tomorrow, Stuart. That's Thursday, the 22nd of October, to discuss taking it forward, and we'll bring that work forward as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lewis. With those comments, can we move the recommendations of that paper and move on to item 20, please?
I will just get item 20 up on my laptop. Okay, item 20 is the month 5 financial health monitoring report. I mean, we've covered leader COVID situation quite a lot under your portfolio, and this paper reflects the financial impact on the council. I think it is worth, again, we discussed various options that could happen in the future. I think it's worth saying that these projections for the 2021 financial year haven't taken account of the impact of any further lockdown on the councils. They do reflect where we are now, but they don't necessarily reflect where we are moving forward. The main point in here is still, in terms of this financial year, is on the budget gap we've identified. And I think if we could ask Victoria Bradshaw to just update us on negotiations with the government around filling that budget gap before we move to members' questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lewis. We were reporting a budget gap position of 51.5 million, and we know last week we had a further announcement of further 1 billion nationally. That equates between 14 and 15 million for the council. We haven't had confirmation yet on that allocation model, but if it was based on the previous 3 tranches, that's how much we're estimating we will receive. So that brings the budget gap down position to around 37.5 million. But as Councillor Lewis has said, that doesn't take into account the further restrictions that we're currently seeing around COVID-19. I did have a further meeting with MHCLG on the 9th of October, and they requested some further information and asked and informed us that the decision would be made at the end of November. What that means, though, is that we will do 2 updates to Executive Board again in November and December. And if the decision isn't favourable, then we will come to Executive Board with our options around how we would need to make emergency provisions to balance the budget for this year. Okay, thank you, Leader and Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you. Councillor Lamb.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, I note you accused me of not understanding the council's finances before I'd even had a chance to comment. But I can reassure you that I do very much understand them and very much appreciate the gravity of the situation. Victoria just alluded to what we might call Plan B there, and coming back to council with an update. But I'd be interested to know what work has been done on Plan B so far to make sure we are in a position that we can present a balanced budget. I'd also give the regular reminder that I'm sure Councillor Lewis would be disappointed if I didn't, that of course a big part of the financial challenge in Leeds is down to MRP, which is made in Leeds, and the cost this year is pretty much exactly the same as the cost of dealing with the COVID crisis this year. And my final question is if someone could confirm that the cost to the council of a national circuit breaker lockdown in lost revenue would be around about £10 million.
Thank you. I'll ask officers to come back just to remind Councillor Lamb, as we're trading the usual issues, MRP was supported by the Conservative group in its inception. Every year it has been in place. The Conservative group could have amended the revenue and capital budget, and they've chosen not to.
Councillor Lewis, I'll come back on the Plan B. We have been doing work undertaken around what the options would be. They won't be favourable and things that we'd want to do, which is why we've gone to MHCLG asking for the capitalisation directive. If that isn't forthcoming, then details of what that Plan B would mean for the council and the city will come to executive board in December. Okay, thank you. I don't know. We'll have to, if it's okay, I wouldn't mind speaking to Councillor Lamb outside the meeting around the 10 million, because I'm not sure what we're referring to. If that's okay, thank you.
Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate, again, the general picture in terms of the COVID-related pressures. I just wanted clarification, really, on this particular paper on one area that was put down as a COVID-related pressure, and that was a pressure of 2.17 million in children's services on residential care. Could that be clarified, please?
Sorry.
I don't.
Oh, I lost you.
Sorry, I didn't know if Sal wanted to come back in on that pressure that's been reported.
I think Tim's on the line, so I'll be able to pick out the detail on that.
Okay, Tim, could you come in, please?
Thank you. This pressure is across the whole tenure of children looked after, and much of it relates to plans to bring children out of external residential care and the additional cost of placements that we have made at the height of the crisis. Some of those placements ended up costing us more than would have normally been the case, and 2.17 million is the estimate of the cost, the additional cost of placements made during the coronavirus crisis.
Thanks for the clarification.
Okay, is that all the comments you want to make, Councillor Galton? Yeah. I don't know if we're having problems with your sound today, but I assume that you've said everything you want to say. Councillor Lewis, do you want to come back in to wrap up, or are you happy to move to moving the recommendations?
I think as the recommendations are to note the position, I think we will just move to the recommendations, Chair.
Okay, could we agree to move the recommendations and move on to your next paper, please?
Thank you. The next paper, which is item 21, is looking towards the process of setting next year's budget. And I think it's worth reflecting we are despite everything else that has gone on and we have discussed earlier in this meeting, we are 14 weeks away, I believe, from having to publish a balanced budget for the financial year 21-22. We still are keenly awaiting the government's comprehensive spending review to understand what how much resource will be available to local government and then to us in particular. However, given the gravity of the position we are in, and we recognise we have to save £118.8 million next year on the current position, we can't wait. We have to start bringing proposals forward that could be included in the complete budget next year. Again, this paper sets out those proposals, many of which require consultation, and that's why we're bringing them forward now, so that consultation can be undertaken and concluded in good time for bringing a budget forward to try and bring some good order to the process. I think we all recognise the difficult position the council is in having to find those amount of savings, and many of the options that are under considerations are ones that we would not be taking were we not in the financial position we are in. I think it's worth reflecting that at September's executive board we brought forward approximately £32 million of savings. This paper represents another 8 million of options, and I stress at this stage they are options, and we will be bringing forward the remainder of the options between now and publishing an initial budget in December. I know from many of the comments I've received, people have said it is a poor timing for this to bring forward, but I can only stress that the budget setting timetable for next financial year is underway, and it is our legal requirement to bring forward a balanced budget based on our knowledge of the resources available.
Okay, thank you. I understand that there's been an announcement today about the comprehensive spending review. Is that correct?
It is, Councillor Blake. It's been announced that it's a one-year settlement, that we'll hear about it in November, and that the provisional settlement will follow that. Thank you.
Okay. I think there is some disappointment being expressed about the one-year nature again. Councillor Lamb, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The first thing to say is that we would reserve our position on this, which I'm sure you would expect. The second thing I want to say is that I really welcome that this has come early to scrutiny, and I hope that's something that will be taken forward as standard practice in future. And I feel, and I hope others will feel, that it adds value to the budget setting process to have those discussions at an early stage. Thirdly, I just want to correct Councillor Lewis, and I'm sure he'll want to apologise and correct the record for himself, that it is not the case that we've supported the administration's MRP policy. We have put forward a number of amendments, which perhaps he didn't understand them or take them on board, which is why he didn't accept them. Had he have done so, of course, the budget gap would be smaller now, and there would be more money to spend on services and less to find. So I'm sure he'll reflect on that. A couple of other points I would make here. All departments have submitted their business as usual proposals. What is notable, and I don't know if someone can explain why there is no service review proposal from Children's Services at this stage. Is that something that we should be expecting to see anytime soon, and when can we expect that? A couple of other things I'd highlight is a concern over the proposal to remove funding for PCSOs, and also I'd like to ask how much has been set aside for the City of Culture for each of the next few years. And while we very much support and indeed proposed that there should be a year of culture in 2023, we have long been of the view, and surely now is the time to say, it should not be funded by the public purse and by the council taxpayers of Leeds. That given some of the decisions that we have to make, that is something that we can easily agree should not be funded. And actually, if we give the clear steer that that's what's happening now, it gives proper time to prepare and raise money from the private sector and others, and that's an easy win. So hopefully there are a few things that can help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lamb. I'll try and work backwards through those. So in terms of your last question, like I said, this isn't a complete budget, and we'll be publishing a complete budget in December. I can, as I said again, there will be another round of proposals coming forward at the next Executive Board on a complete budget in December. And I believe there will be the opportunity for Children's Services to bring forward savings in those. Again, I can assure you I have read every Conservative budget amendment from the last 5 years, and I will address those points when we come to a full budget council. I've read them very carefully indeed.
Thank you. Councillor Galton.
Well, no one can accuse Councillor Lewis of not having an eye for detail, so I look forward to that scrutiny as well. In terms of this particular paper, as it is almost effectively a new budget or the preparation for one, what I will say is, yes, we reserve our position because there is much in this with which we do not agree. But one thing that I will say that's positive is we really appreciate that these are being brought early and that there is some transparency to it. And also, I concur with Councillor Lamb around the concern that this group had as well, that Children's Services did not have one of those systems reviews in place as every other department did. And I hope that Councillor Lewis is correct and that this will be rectified as further reports come forward. One thing I will say as well is, in particular, in adult social care, there are proposals there which we don't support, but what is very useful and is appreciated is the reports that are attached, which actually give grounds for how decision making has come to those conclusions which they've made. And I think that's very helpful and is a model that could be replicated well by other departments when they are putting forward arguments for the proposals that they are bringing forward, because it will hopefully sort out those departments which often approach this kind of budget setting exercise with a salami slicing approach, as opposed to real value-based prioritization. Thank you.
Councillor Lewis.
Thank you. Again, I won't, given we've been going 3 hours, I won't repeat many of the comments I made earlier, that, however, you know, this is a, given the seriousness of the situation and the fact that we're asking the organisation both to respond to a pandemic as well as take over £100 million worth of spending out, reports are coming forward early. We do need to take some of these savings as a full year effect if we choose indeed to take them. And I, again, I reiterate the point, this isn't a complete budget. These are bringing options forward, and we will have a draft budget in December and a full budget in February, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Could we move the recommendations and note the comments from Councillor Lamb? And move on to the final item of the afternoon, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Leader. This is another paper that sits alongside the budget setting exercise. It is the accelerated. Sorry, you all disappeared for a second there. Can you hear me?
Wishful thinking.
I think I'm having connection problems. So yes, this is the accelerated capital receipts and estate rationalisation, and this is bringing forward 4 properties we've already agreed to dispose of for auction and bringing forward 3 further properties for disposal as part of the need to realise money from properties to support the budget.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lamb?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And we wouldn't be able to support this paper, and that there's a couple of reasons I'd set out, and a couple of asks really. First of all, I think there's a danger that we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater with some of these things. I'm going to highlight 2 particular examples, and the other concern is around consulting properly. So if I look first at East Lodge, part of Temple Newsome, and while I very much respect the views of ward members, and it's quite right that they were consulted, this is a listed building, part of the Temple Newsome estate. It's a citywide asset, and it cannot be acceptable that it's only the 3 ward councillors that have been consulted, when the Friends of Temple Newsome haven't been consulted. And my understanding is they're not happy with the proposals as they stand. They had offered to raise money themselves to try and deal with repairs and things, and that has been rebuffed. So one of the asks is that there's at the very least a pause to have that consultation and those discussions and make sure their views and others are taken into account as part of this. And the second issue I'd like to highlight is the Leeds Sailing and Activity Centre. And again, this is one where the more you look at it, the more you think perhaps we're not taking the right approach here. And not only is this something that provides a unique and valuable service to the city, but there are opportunities, and we've received representations, I'm sure you have as well, from those who suggest that there are ways that this could be made financially viable and could be made to work. And so again, I would ask that there is proper consultation and that we do explore thoroughly all the options around this before we proceed. So there are my comments on this one. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Lewis, do you want to come back in first?
Yeah, thank you. I can't see the sailing centre in this current paper. I believe it was in the last paper. So I will note Councillor Lamb's comments there. The properties in question are the ones listed in here. In terms of East Lodge, I'm sure Councillor Cooper will want to come in on this again, just to reassure you, Councillor Lamb, it is the intention to sell a very long lease on this property, so we will remain the landlord, which will mean that we will be able to maintain its status. Obviously, any sale will be on the basis of its Grade 2 listed status is respected, and again, taking the approach we will do, will protect the we'll have the guarantees around the external presentation of the building. I think it's fair to say the proposal is for it to be used as a house, and it has been occupied as a house until a few years ago. So we do want to continue its historic use. We're just in a position that we don't necessarily, as a council, have the resources to bring it forward ourselves, which is why we are taking the approach we are.
Okay, Councillor Cooper, would you like to come in, as it's your ward?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just want to correct a couple of things that Councillor Lamb alluded to. Actually, it wasn't just ward members that were consulted back in 2018, actually. It was the Friends of Temple Newsome were consulted on the future of this building, this dwelling. And not only the Friends, but actually the wider community were also consulted on this in residents' meetings. As Temple Newsome ward members, we always consult our local residents on issues that may impact on them, or they may wish to have some influence over Councillor Lamb. One of the points about East Lodge at Temple Newsome is that actually it's used as a residential dwelling, and it's the proposal that's before us today doesn't change that. So it's not going to disappear. It will still be retained as a residential dwelling, and ultimately we will still keep the ownership of it. as Temple News and Ward councillors, we're always more than delighted to speak to the friends of Temple Newsham, and indeed some of your close contacts who used to be chair and maybe using this item as a political football at the moment, which you know, is not the best thing to do while we're trying to deal with a pandemic, as we've said, and also with the financial challenges that we've never seen the like of before. So, you know, as far as Temple Newsham Ward councillors are concerned, we have consulted with our residents, and we've consulted with the friends of Temple Newsham Park, and will continue to do that whilever we are the councillors here.
Might I come back in, Councillor Blake, please?
If you're brief.
I'll be very brief. The reason I raised the issue is because the friends of Temple Newsham are the people who've asked me to raise why they haven't been consulted on this. So perhaps Councillor Cooper can explain why they have those concerns. She feels they have been consulted. They feel they haven't. So an explanation will be useful.
I'm more than happy, and indeed one of my ward colleagues was at the meeting where they were consulted on, and I'm sure there are some minutes from that if you ask the friends of Temple Newsham.
Okay, can we move on now to Councillor Galton? Thank you, Councillor Cooper.
No further comments, Chair.
Okay, we've had a long session this afternoon. Can we bring the comments on the last paper to a close? Anything further you want to say, Councillor Lewis?
Thank you. I think we've covered all the points necessary.
Thank you. With that, can we note the comments? Gerard, I'm assuming you're looking at the comments in the chat function in terms of positions on the different papers.
Yeah, that's fine, Councillor Blake. I'll note those in the minutes, yeah.
Can we note those positions and move the recommendations of the paper? Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of the Executive Board this afternoon. Thank you all very much for your time and attention.